All right, welcome back, everyone. Um, just to get started, I'm going to introduce everyone to our topic. So, learning is key for success and achievement. However, learning should not be limited to schools and classrooms. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic for young learners. Our topic today is extracurricular learning, which is something that allows us to acquire skills that are not taught at schools. The advantages of extracurricular learning are varied. It allows us to explore our interests, learn hobbies, and skills that are taught at schools while broadening our social circles and many more things. This podcast, we have David and Curtis, some experienced volunteers here to share their experience in coding as well as other extracurricular activities. Also, before we start, I just want to remind everyone to like, subscribe, and follow on all our platforms. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyson. I'm Yusef, for all of you guys who don't know or do know. So kind of going off of what Tyson said, we're going to be focusing on three main points, topics, or stuff that we want to cover. The first one is how extracurricular activities supports your current and future academic achievement, how it also enhances your leadership and other social skills and soft skills. So not necessarily the technical side of skills, but just a broader enhancement of your personal self, and then how it supports your opportunities to volunteer in different organizations that will help you, that will propel you in your future development. So like Tyson said, we will have two guests today with us to help us talk about this. Two people that I've worked very closely with at MCC. The first one is David. So before I ask David to introduce himself, I'm going to say a couple things about David. So me and David have taught a couple of courses together. We've taught, I think, a Python course, a Dart course, and maybe a couple few that I'm kind of forgetting. But super smart guy. I know he's very busy and he works a lot. So without further ado, David, everybody.
Okay.
Hey there, David.
All right.
Yeah, you're good.
Hi, I'm David. I'm a grade 12 student at John Fraser Secondary School. So you might know what that is. And in the past, I've worked as a software architect at a charity called Taking It Global, and of course at MCC as well as an instructor. And I also run a hackathon called Fraser Hacks, which happened last year, but might happen again this year. Keep an eye out for that. So I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. We are excited to have you here with us. The other guest that we have today is Curtis. I haven't worked as closely with Curtis. I know Tyson and Henry both have.
Yep.
So I don't know if you guys want to say anything about Curtis.
He is a nice man.
Yeah.
Hey, Curtis, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's good. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I also go to John Fraser Secondary School. I'm in grade 12. And for me, MCC was really my first sort of big teaching opportunity related to coding. So
Awesome.
That's great.
Very, very nice. That's super duper. Cool. So I guess that's the two guys that we're going to be talking to. They'll be saying a bunch of stuff. And yeah.
All right. So just going back to what Yusuf said, our first the first thing that we want to talk about is how coding and programming supports current and future academic achievement. The most common reason why students actually get involved with these types of learning activities, like the MCC coding classes, is because of its academic advantages, both while they're still in school as well as after they graduate from high school and move on to university, and even after university, there's a lot of different applications of coding. For example, take another type of course like swimming, for example. Swimming classes are also an extracurricular that might help you in the school swim team. Similarly, volunteering in community organizations helps fulfill one of your high school graduation requirements. Today we'll be talking about how coding is going to help you in the future as an extracurricular learning. So I'd like to ask the first question. David, would you please tell us about your coding journey? When did you start, and how did you become, how did you find yourself in the world of coding?
I'll be honest. Like my dad is a software developer, so it kind of like he kind of pushed me into it from an early age. So like my first memory of it was like I guess when I was 9 actually. Like you know at the library how there's those books that teach you how to like code ASP.NET in 24 hours. So I just like did a bunch of those. Like I pretended to do them. Like I would just copy the code in it and that's it. So I guess that's kind of like my first dip in programming. But I'll be honest, I think where I got interested was when you could actually use like programming to make things. So like in grade 8, I ran this online store that sold fidget spinners. That was don't do that, bad idea. But the good part about that is that I used a lot of my coding skills to actually make the store work better. Like, you know, making things faster, adding custom sections to it. And I think that's what people fail to like appreciate about coding is that it's like when you look at it, it's like a really abstract thing. But when you actually get to apply it, it becomes way more interesting. And that's kind of how you can sort of develop your passion for it.
You know what? That's actually a great point. Curtis, do you want to expand upon this? You can also tell us about your coding journey.
Funny enough, I think me and David had pretty similar like starting out points. Like my dad was also he worked in the IT field, and my first memory was he ran this like basement sort of lesson. Like I guess you could say similar to the MCC, but it was like really, really, really basic for me and a couple of friends. And I also didn't really like it at first, but I think once you really get introduced to the topic and you kind of go more in depth and you can see how you can like take what you know and make something cool out of it, that's like when you really get, well, that's when I really got interested into coding.
So both of you started coding because your parents did coding stuff. Nice. But I really liked what you said at the end, how coding gets interesting once you like know a bit more about coding. Like at the beginning, it's like just like very abstract, but then the more you code, like the better it gets. And then once you can actually start doing stuff, it like becomes like almost like a second language. So yeah, I think that was a really good point to touch on.
If I could just add on there.
Yeah, go.
So for me, it was like really similar to them, where at one point it just became more fun because I was actually able to do stuff and I was understanding the things I was doing. And that's the thing about coding, right? So once you get started, you don't know anything at all. And when you keep going, every language becomes more and more similar, and you notice the similarities between everything, and you kind of connect the dots at one point, and everything starts to make sense.
Yeah, I also agree with. Let me talk, Henry.
Go ahead.
I also agree. I think what's really cool is how you guys kind of brought up on the idea that like at the beginning it's not fun, but as soon as you go and find out like all the cool stuff about something, it becomes more enjoyable. And I think that's a really good quality to have. And it just goes to show that you have to kind of keep an open mind and open perspective and outlook on whatever you do, just because nothing is going to be at fun at the beginning or when you first start. You have to kind of really get into it and get into the nitty gritty to find that enjoyment and the power of something.
Yusef,
Sorry,
don't
Henry.
you? Yeah, go ahead. It's all right. Don't you also have like a similar coding journey?
Yeah, I actually do. So I never, if we're talking about me, I never ever, like up until like when I was probably your age, did I actually discover that I wanted to even pursue coding. For me, it was all like first it was like lawyer, like that was my real like first like thing that I was gonna pursue. You know, I watched Suits and I was like Harvey Specter. I want to be that. But no, I think in grade 11 or 12, my mom, I think, or somebody not forced me, but kind of pushed me to take a course. I would always help out because the family business MCC, but I never really actually got into it. I was never actually interested until I took that course in high school, and then everything just instantly started clicking. And now here I am studying computer security at Sheridan.
It's really why like MCC is so good, because the way the courses are designed, it like, yeah, it teaches you coding, but it immediately like forces you to use like the knowledge you learn and apply it to like some sort of mini project. And all those projects have real life applicability, like be it like a schedule maker or some sort of sorter, counter. It's really easy to see how it could be useful. And I think that's why students who start with MCC classes like always develop and like an aspiration for coding.
No doubt, I completely agree.
Yeah. So now that we've talked a bit about like how we started coding, I was just wondering, how has coding helped you guys like in school, or maybe like helped you get other opportunities? Curtis, do you want to talk about that?
Well, for me, I was like into a bit of competitive programming, and for those of you who don't know, it's just like programming, like for the sole purpose of solving problems that are like generally like problems you don't really see in real life. And I don't know, it's a bit like relaxing, just it's like practicing your problem solving skills, and it's like helping in school because like it's not always as like simple as black and white. Like, oh, you have this formula and you can now solve it, right? It's like, oh, you have this technique you need to use to solve this problem, and then it all depends on how you implement it and how you're gonna make it work, right? And there's always gonna be those like small things that you have to account for, and like those edge cases you have to think about. I thought that kind of helped like teach me just how to like my thinking skills, and just how to like apply a lot of like basic things to like a broader aspect.
Have you gotten any extra opportunities? Maybe like, did you participate in hackathons? You did say you participated in some competitions.
Yeah, like generally like the CCC, the Canadian Computing Competition. It's a pretty well regulated competition that's hosted by Waterloo. And then I also often compete in DModge contests, and that's like a third-party site where they host small contests, and you can increase or decrease your rating depending on how you do.
Cool.
And I should
Cool.
mention, for like for these programming like contests or competitive programming, it might seem like a competition, but actually, if you know enough of it, when you're like, well, this is like way down the road in the future, but if you're applying for a job at like a reasonably reputable company, you need to know all this stuff, because they're going to use it, and they're going to use it to test how you think and how you problem solve. And if you already know it in high school or whatever, then you're way ahead of the pack. So that's kind of like one of the reasons why people do it. And even though it might seem boring and tedious, eventually you're going to need it. So it's a good idea to get a head start on it, like I just did.
As David, as someone that you said that you run that hackathon at your school, what do you think, like kind of on the same topic, what do you think kind of, what do students gain in terms of just like technical skills, personal skills, just any sort of skills that someone might gain from joining competitions, whether that be hackathons, CTFs, stuff like the CCC? What do they have to gain by joining stuff like that?
Well, I think there's like a couple categories you could split them into. Like CTFs and hackathons are all kind of like group projects, right? Because they're kind of working in a team to solve a problem. So in a CTF, for those of you that don't know, it's a capture the flag. It's kind of like, I mean, when you think of capture the flag, it's like football, but it's not football. It's like you literally go on a website and you try to like hack it, and then you try to find the flag, which is like usually a bunch of words. And if you find the words, then you get points, and you try to win as many of these as possible. And usually you do them in groups, right? So it really tests your problem solving skills as a group, especially teamwork, because you're gonna have like 4 people working on this one side at a time, and you gotta make sure you're doing everything efficiently. No one's trying to like do things that someone else is doing. So that kind of applies to a hackathon too. And I think what a lot of people learn from hackathons or these CTFs in general is how to sort of take coding, which people think of as like very antisocial. That's a stereotype, like Mr. Robot, all that
Big
stuff.
time. Big time.
And then sort of apply that and work in a group, which is actually how it works in the real world. You're never working by yourself, ever. It's always in a group. And I would argue that, like, even for most programmers, you could have someone who could do 100 algorithms, make like, I don't know, an AI in 5 minutes. They wouldn't get hired if they're like actually antisocial. That just doesn't work out.
I'm very happy that you brought that up, because it's so true. Like, you couldn't be more true. You need to have some aspect of social skills to do anything moving forward.
Yeah, that kind of holds true. Like, especially at like MCC, where everyone's kind of working in groups, right? During the classes.
Exactly.
I think it's good to get them started early like that, or else 100%. It becomes really easy to sort of fall into the trap where you always work by yourself, and that's just bad.
No doubt. Cool. I think we can move on from this. I really appreciate what you guys have to say. Very, very good stuff.
So I'm gonna ask the next question for you guys. So did you think that your journey with coding, or did your journey with coding offer any opportunities to lead or teach any groups? Anyone? Curtis or David, whoever thinks this applies to them more.
Like teaching.
Sure, I can like teaching in general.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if coding. I think like with coding, it's really nice to like teach a lot of like young students, especially when they're early, especially when you're just trying to get them interested in the topic because you just know how important like coding is and IT will be in the future. So like previously before MCC, I did tutor two kids, and I continued to tutor them until COVID. And like MCC was my first real classroom sort of oriented teaching style, and I really enjoyed it. Thought it was really engaging, and it was sort of fun to put smiles on your students' faces when they finally make something with like the code that you guys work together to make, right?
Yeah.
So I think for that part, like coding has helped just knowledge wise, and it's always good to know like after you teach someone that that oh you might have like sparked their interest, right? May have like shown them down a path that they want to continue in the future.
Yeah, like I know me and you, Curtis, we taught the same class together. I think probably 3 or 4 times, maybe three or two. I don't know. But we worked a lot together at MCC, and we totally had that happen with our students. Like for an example, I remember what's his name? Noah was like really bad when we started teaching him, and he didn't know anything about coding, and he seemed really interested. Every time we'd give him homework, he'd go home and he'd do his homework. He'd come back to class all happy to show it off to all his classmates. And like that's the type of thing that we love to see as teachers, right? It's like when students are going out of their way to like be proud of what they did. That's what I really like about it.
Absolutely. I think that you guys, yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. For time's sake, we're gonna move on. So I guess just to like wrap that whole thing up, it's clear that coding is a super important skill, whether that be to help you build soft skills and technical skills, or just to help you move forward. A cool quote by Justin Trudeau says that every job we're going to do in the future will rely on technology and be benefited if you are powerful users of the technology that surrounds us. So I think that's a good way to end that segment off. Yeah, coding is just going to be super duper important moving forward. Now, in terms of like, if we just dive in on a personal skills standpoint, like forget all the technical things that coding brings. What is it like for me? I always see, like, I think David, you touched upon it, how working in a team environment is super duper important, and it builds those soft skills that you need to be successful. And like you said, nobody's gonna hire you if you like, even if you know how to build an algorithm in under like 5 seconds or whatever the case may be. If you can't communicate those ideas, if you don't know how to work around people, it's like very damaging. So I guess, David, you spoke about working as a software engineer, and I think I kind of want to know, how was that experience with everything being online as well, right? So like, you had that experience, you were working within the field, within the industry, but you had to do it in an online sense. Can you kind of talk about that?
Right. So obviously, I think programming lends itself to being completely online, because if this was like McDonald's or something, you can't flip over behind, right? So I mean, if with it being online, obviously it's hard to talk to everyone in the office or to get to know your coworkers well. But I think the benefit of it being online is that it helps you get work done really quickly. I mean, obviously being in your own like office or room is a lot better than being somewhere you're not familiar with. So that is an advantage. But I think honestly, like with how everything's going right now, the majority of jobs will probably end up being remote, just because of how the industry is trending. And it's honestly not that different from being in an office. You're still doing the same job. You're talking to the same people. It's just maybe over Zoom or Slack instead of face to face. Yeah, that's about all that really changed from being online. The job's still the same.
Some would also
100%.
argue that it's more efficient because like you don't waste time and commute, and there's like less distractions. And when you're working like
Yeah.
by yourself in your own room, you are a lot more focused. So yeah, I can see why the industry is trending in the way that it is.
Yeah. So I talked to my dad about this actually. Like he works in the IT industry, and just talking about how like COVID has changed in general. And there are like a few changes that I thought were pretty interesting. Like first off, like apparently in the workplace, a lot of times people will walk around and they'll have like small talk. So now that everybody's at home, they're usually a lot more focused and they can do work. And another thing that I found really interesting was how they do team building exercises, right? So before, a lot of times they might go outside and do something physical to exercise, but as everything's gone online, a lot of teams have resorted to online things in order to sort of team build and communicate. It's just in the workplace in general, not only in IT. I know some teams have actually played video games together, like Among Us, which I found really surprising, and I thought that was really interesting. So.
Yeah, it's super cool. That whole shift to everything being online is very interesting. I appreciate that point. Very, very valid.
What other soft skills would you say you've developed through your journey with coding? I know for me personally, my time management has gone a lot better, as well as like my ability to help others. What other soft skills have you guys developed? Like this,
I'll take this one.
like
No one's gonna do it. All right, so yeah, so I mean, like I said earlier, right? Because if you're actually coding and you're going to these events, hackathons, really fun. If you don't go to them, I'd recommend going to one once COVID is over. It's not really the same online, but anyways, yeah. So obviously working in groups, that's like the main kind of soft skill there, just communication in general, and I think that's just the crux of it, right? Because as long as you can communicate well, that's a basis of every single other soft skill. You can learn how to lead by teaching courses or by running hackathons, but as long as you can communicate well, and I think that's what coding really helps you to do, which is communicate this super abstract thing so that other people who might not know coding, can understand what you're doing. And I think as long as people can sort of achieve that or work to achieve it, that's like a really important soft skill they can develop.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
to add on to your point, David, sorry. I think you touched on communication, but I think with communication, you get this really good ability to kind of be patient, right? Because you're working in such a big team sometimes, whether that be 4 or 5 and sometimes 10 people. The ability to be able to kind of listen to others' opinions and kind of go off each other and kind of, I'm not going to say suppress your own opinions, but kind of just be able to know when it's time for you to talk and time to let someone else talk and not push and force your opinions on other people. So I think that in itself, along with communication, are 2 really important qualities that coding really, really does teach, because you'll run into bugs 99% of the time, and you will spend 4 hours trying to figure it out, and then behold, you missed a semicolon or you missed an equal sign in an if statement, right? So it teaches you patience in a very neat and unique way that I don't think you'll be able to get anywhere else.
Exactly. So basically, what you can take away from this segment is that you can't really develop soft skills just from like sitting in a classroom or listening to your teacher. It really comes down to the interactions you're going to get from working with others, like David said, in hackathons and like similar competitions, and learning from your mistakes, which is like the main thing that coding really, really helps you with. And this kind of brings us to our third topic about how coding actually creates opportunities for volunteering and professional development, such as being an instructor at MCC. I was just wondering how your journey with coding shaped your outlook for the future. Did it make you more positive and hopeful? Curtis, you can answer this.
I don't know if I can answer this to the best extent because I think coding has helped me like become the person that I am, right? Like through my journeys, like just learning like how to problem solve, like teamwork and everything. But for me, my future's a bit unsure. So I think David might be able to better answer this question.
I I mean, I think a lot of like basis of being hopeful is really just like financial security, if you're gonna be honest. And like coding is like one of the jobs you can have that guarantees that, because there are literally not enough coders or programmers right now to fill the demand. So if you like know enough to like I don't know, make a website or a web app, you can probably get employed. So I think that's like a good fallback if my plans don't really work out. And I think that's definitely something people consider when they kind of look into this field for university or when they're trying to learn on their own.
That's a
build
great-
off of.
You know what? Go ahead, Yusuf. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. I wanted to kind of build on that question because you guys are all in grade 12 and you guys are all contemplating life right now and what you're gonna do with your lives. What's your thought process? What are you asking yourselves, and where are you guys leaning to right now? And I give that question to all you guys.
I guess. Okay.
Just Tyson, go.
Well,
I feel like Curtis is a guest. Okay, you know what? I'll just go. So yeah, since I'm in grade 12, right? So I gotta prepare for next year, and for me that means applying to universities. So for me, I want to go into software engineering or computer engineering, and I'll be applying to those type of programs at U of T, Waterloo. And I'm also going for co-op programs as well. I'm gonna try
Smart
to
man.
those. Yeah. I think co-op is actually really good because you get to like kind of get a taste of what it's like in the workplace while you're learning, and you also get paid for it. So it's kind of nothing to lose. But it actually all depends on like your learning style. But for me, I think it would be good. Anyways, someone else. I feel like everyone has something to say.
Yeah, I think
We're
my
gonna get on
experience
that.
has been very different from a lot of yours. It's like you guys, not sure about you, but you guys already have like a set goal in mind. For me, it's really different. Like I've had to sample a lot of fields. Like I've looked into economics, I've looked into accounting, so like not even just only computer science, right? And like law. But I find that like something that's really common among them is just like the ability to problem solve. Like I know coding has helped with that, but with like my future, like even though I'm really unsure about it, I always know that coding is going to be one outlook that I will be able to look forward to, right? But like me as a person, I choose to prioritize like my happiness, right, over how much money I'm going to make. So if I find something that I'm passionate about, I'm likely gonna go down that path.
I really like your philosophy there. It's like prioritizing your happiness over the amount of money you make, and I think that's something a lot of people in this society today miss. And a lot of people set their goal to be as rich as possible, and just kind of don't care about themselves enough. So
Yeah, and like building off of what Curtis was saying about how coding helps you develop problem-solving skills and similar soft skills, you don't necessarily have to go into, like Tyson, you're doing computer science stuff, right? You don't necessarily have to go into computer science. Like that shouldn't be the only reason you're taking coding. There's a lot of opportunities that you get, like volunteer, work experience. You learn teamwork and all those. Those are all like very, very useful skills that you can use in the future for pretty much any job in any field. Like I want to grow up and be a doctor. At first glance, you're like, how does coding help you become a doctor? Not only can I put some stuff on my application about how coding has impacted my life, I can also talk about how I'm such a great candidate because I have such good problem-solving skills and patience and all those kinds of things. So yeah.
You're muted, Tyson.
Tyson, you're muted.
Freaking technology, bro.
oh, sorry. All right. Yeah. So I forgot to unmute, but yeah. Let's move on to the next question here. So for our volunteers, not everyone this time. Does your knowledge help you in coding, like for your future? Like your knowledge in coding, do you think it will help you in your future, especially if that future is not related to coding? So maybe Curtis is a better person to answer this.
So I've talked to my dad a bit about this actually, and I think so. Yeah, like IT is going to be everywhere, right? Like the whole basis of us moving into this new technological era is the fact that everything's going to be online, right? Like even areas like accounting has IT like implementation, right? Like they're making like AI to like help predict future outcomes with like stock markets too. So like basically with I think every single field, I think with the exception of like in person and like actual physical jobs, I think that just having a basic understanding of like coding and like how it works, like it can really help like how you work in the future, right? Like my dad has talked about how a lot of times he has like people from other teams that aren't related to IT tell him that they want this thing in one day, but like you can't do that because it's a process you need to go through, right? There's a lot of patience that goes into coding and a lot of thinking. So I definitely think that IT will just knowledge about like coding in general will definitely help.
Right.
And
Yeah,
especially
I
for
totally agree. Oh, you wanna add something? Okay.
sure, I'll add on. Especially for fields like business, because like I don't know, I think I want to eventually move to doing stuff like in business or at least consulting. So like for a lot of those fields, everything right now is dominated by statistics or data. So if you know how to like manage that data, go through it using coding or Python or something like that, then that already puts you at a huge advantage. So even if you're not necessarily looking to become a programmer, all of these fields, at least like some of the fields like finance, economics, accounting, like Curtis said, or business, you need to have some of that knowledge to stand out. So it's a good thing to know, even if I end up not going into software engineering, which at this point doesn't seem likely, but if it happens, at least I'll be able to carry my knowledge over.
Right.
Absolutely. I think what's really cool that like there's two contrasts to this is like there's the pathway where you just like dive into coding head on and you do computer science or something related to computers. Then there's a pathway of not doing something technologically related, but still having the awareness to know that being technologically aware and being able to use tools and coding, whatever it may be, is still important. And I think that that's really, it's super important that you guys know that. And it's clear that you do. So I just want to say kudos to you guys. I also want to say, Curtis, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing that you don't know what you're gonna kind of get yourself into. Like, take it from me, a person who didn't know he was gonna go to Sheridan until he had to apply to actually go. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's really good that you have that open mindset and you're aware of that and you're actually thinking about it. So kudos to all you guys. I think you guys are very smart and you guys have very bright futures ahead of you. And that goes for everyone, not just Curtis and David, Henry, and Tyson.
Yeah, I feel like having a lot of options is better than having very few. So
Right. So I totally agree with everything you guys have been saying. Like Curtis brought up the point that coding changes your mindset. No matter what field you go into, coding will still help you out with problem solving and with other skills that you need in that field. Since coding uses computers, people get lots of access to practicing on computers and such, and that really helps people to get better with technology. And I totally agree with all that. And by doing those things, they help brighten their future, as Yusef said. And yeah, so I think it's really great what you guys mentioned. So I think we need to wrap up here. We're a bit over time, so thank you guys so much for coming into the podcast. And to our viewers, just remember to subscribe and like and share with your friends if you like this content. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you, Curtis and David.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
all right, thank you.